Hi, I'm Nicole Ferraro, and this is The Divide, a podcast from Light Reading exploring the ongoing digital divide, why and where it still exists, and what needs to be done to get people everywhere connected to reliable, high speed internet. My guest today is Paolo Balboa, Chief Digital Equity Officer for the City of New York. This is our first of two episodes we're publishing focused on digital equity initiatives underway in New York City. On next week's episode, you'll hear from two officials leading New York's Neighborhood Tech Help program, one of several programs the city has in place to assist people with digital needs, which you'll also hear referenced today. But in today's conversation, more broadly, we'll hear from Paolo, who is the city's first ever Chief Digital Equity Officer, on the main barriers to broadband access throughout the 5 boroughs of New York, what's been accomplished so far through rolling out the city's digital equity roadmap, some lessons and takeaways from the recent Digital Inclusion Week held in New York City, and more. Paolo, welcome back to the podcast. It has been a while, but you are a prior guest, and it's lovely to see you again in a different role than you were in last time. How's it going?
Great. Thanks for having me back, Nicole. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, it is my pleasure. So since we last spoke, you have become the Chief Digital Equity Officer of the greatest city in the world, New York City, my hometown, my lifelong. So I would love for you to sort of reintroduce yourself to our audience and tell us a bit about your role. How long have you been the Chief Digital Equity Officer? I believe you're the first one we've ever had, and a bit about what you do in that role.
Sure. Yeah. I'll do the high level stuff. Before I came here, generally my background is in public libraries. I worked in public library education, adult education, for 10 years. I was teaching computer classes, writing curriculum, first at the Cleveland Public Library, then at the New York Public Library. And shortly after I finished my master's degree, while I was working at the New York Public Library, I began working for an organization called the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. And that's, of course, where I first spoke with you, Nicole. So, in that role, I was overseeing how NDIA could support specifically local governments write digital equity plans and then implement those plans into actionable programs and policies. So, coming to the current day, earlier this year, the city published a document called a Digital Equity Roadmap, which I'm sure we're going to get into later on in our conversation. But one of the tenets of that document was to create a digital equity office here in New York City government. And when I saw this posting, I was like, I have to go for this. This seems tailor made for me. It's local government. It's where I had already been living. I've been here for 8 years. So I really jumped at the opportunity to continue doing digital equity work, but this time specifically in the place where I live. Like, it really mattered to me that I was doing stuff that affected, friends, neighbors, family members, people who live here. So it was really happy to be here, and I started this role earlier this summer in June. So new, but it's been a fast track, right? I've been doing this work in some way, shape, or form for several years at this point. So,
Yeah.
applying my knowledge here to the city.
It's a great background to bring to this role, which I'm sure is a very complicated role. And I want to get to the roadmap that you mentioned, but before we get to that, tell me about some of the biggest barriers that you've uncovered to digital equity here in New York City. I'm sure they differ from neighborhood to neighborhood, borough to borough, but and feel free to highlight how they differ as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's interesting, still, transitioning from my previous role, which had a national scope and working with all different types of communities, right? Like urban, suburban, hyper rural areas, and switching my focus now to New York City, right? The most populous city in the country is, it's interesting that the conversation, or, the topic of internet access is not so much of an issue or a barrier here, right? We live in a very well connected city, so households across the city have access. They are able to get an internet subscription, but that number of households that do have an internet subscription is not fully at 100%, right? Like, we know that there are plenty of households, specifically in historically underserved neighborhoods, that don't have a home internet subscription. So the question then becomes why, right? Like this is something that we would that I would ask before on the national level, but now that I'm here, I can really dig deep into, my neighborhood, like other parts of the city that I know quite well. And what comes up over and over are a few things. One of
Mhm.
which is like so barriers to broadband adoption, right?
Yeah.
So one of which is affordability.
Mhm.
It's for plenty of households, it's simply too expensive here, or it's simply too expensive to let's say add another bill to like a monthly expense. But then along with that, when talking with folks who are most affected by the digital divide, there's this other kind of gray area that's all about like I don't think I need the internet or I don't want to use the internet. But I really like to dig deeper in those conversations and ask like, why not?
Mhm.
And what becomes clear is that there's just like a lack of information or a lack of understanding. So there's a lot of like conversations and expression of the value of the internet that I see my office, along with addressing affordability, of course, right? But I just want to talk about like that information piece as one of the primary things that I'm trying to stand up in this office. Like, how can we really reach people where they're at and sort of like speak on their terms and in ways that they can understand.
Yeah. So, a few things you mentioned are have a few follow ups just in terms of I believe you came into the role after the Affordable Connectivity Program ended, right? So,
Mhm.
did you have a sense of? I mean, obviously that impacted New Yorkers greatly, but do you have a sense after taking your role of how much that really impacted access and adoption?
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to give a hat tip to colleagues at the Benton Institute of Broadband and Technology because they've done some really good research specifically on how the ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program, how that affected New York City. So we know that when ACP ended, at ACP's peak, in other words, up to 1 million households in New York were signed up for that program. So when it went away, that's just under an eighth of the city's households that suddenly lost their internet subscription. So that we're still working within this space of the Affordable Connectivity Program going away. Thankfully, our friends at the state broadband office, Connect All, like earlier this year, the Affordable Broadband Act went into effect, and that is a first of its kind in the nation. And what we're thinking about doing here in the city is like working intentionally with the broadband office in order to get the word out, right? Like, so like going back to what I was expressing in the previous question, like, some households might not know about this and
Mhm.
like, what can we be doing? Like, how can we be supporting this effort moving forward?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that exact question because it is my understanding that while we do have this law in the books, it may not be that enough people know about it to take advantage of it. Obviously, it was held up in the court for a long time before it actually was enacted. So, yeah, I'm very curious to see efforts from offices like yours that can figure out partnerships that'll help get the word out to help people actually enroll in affordable internet. At the same time, it still might not be affordable at $15, $20 for a lot of families, particularly as more benefits get taken away at the federal level and things get more chaotic and expensive. Okay, but let's talk about the digital equity roadmap. Tell us a bit about what it is and what work has been done so far to roll it out, and how far along are you in that process?
Sure. Yeah. So the roadmap was published in March of this year, and for I know that you're familiar with like the what I like to describe as like the element of digital equity, but for the purposes of this audience, I'll do it again really quickly. So there are a total of 11 initiatives outlined in the roadmap, and each of them can be categorized into these traditional elements of digital equity. So there's an element that there are several components of the roadmap that address home broadband adoption. There are several elements that address device access, and then there's a few elements that address like digital skills, like that one-to-one tech support.
Mhm.
So going back to home internet, a few of the initiatives that are outlined in the roadmap that we have achieved at this point, 6 months in, is the launch of a pilot called Liberty Link,
Mhm.
which is a pilot for specifically Section 8 households in Upper Manhattan and the Bronx, and for households that are on the Section 8 voucher program. They are eligible to receive free internet to their home. Again, there's might be gaps there with getting people to know about that program. So that's always like the issue here. And then another initiative related to home internet adoption is the Big Apple Connect program, which is
Mhm.
really like the program to point at, especially with this mayoral administration. And the thrust of that program is that for households that live in New York City Housing Authority buildings, NYCHA, that's our public housing here. If you live in one of those households, then you also have access to free internet. You just need to go ahead and sign up for it.
Yeah.
So those are two programs that we're really proud to really stand up that address that internet adoption gap, and we're doubly proud of the research that went into standing up those programs. So we were very, very intentional about making sure that we were delivering these programs in places for households that it would affect the most, right? Historically underserved areas of the city. Um, as far as devices go, device access, like that's a lot of those initiatives are aligned along a program that this office in different iterations has overseen before, and that's called that's a program called Connected Communities. So Connected Communities is a program where the Office of Technology and Innovation supports the three public libraries, the Parks Department, the Department of Aging, and also NYCHA again to provide public computer sites so for people who know about them and want to get on a computer there. They also have free Wi-Fi outfitted, and a lot and all of each of those sites they all have some sort of tech programming. And this is actually like a nice full circle moment for me because when I was at the New York Public Library, I didn't know it at the time, but I my position was funded through this Connected Communities program, right? The New York
Oh,
Public
cool.
Library's Tech Connect program. Like I was one of the instructors, and one of the cool things for me when I entered this position here with the city was seeing like, oh, that's what I was doing. So
Yeah.
I'm still really closely connected with the library world. So um, you know, there's also support through the NYCHA, the public housing. They have digital vans, which are mobile vans that go that they post the schedule online. They park outside of a different NYCHA building throughout the month, and they have device access in there. So they have laptops that people can get on. They of course have a person who's there to answer any questions, and these are for the residents of those buildings. And then of course there's the neighborhood tech help program, which I love this program so much. It's a digital navigator model. Um, it's delivered by the three public library systems, and it really makes sense in a place like a public library because this is already like within the scope of services that a library typically would provide, but it's just a more formalized and more buttoned up process there. So yeah.
Yeah. And so I mean, just about some of the programs you mentioned for Liberty Link, I remember covering that announcement, but where is that is that actually, that's not deployed yet, right?
It launched, so it's a pilot. It launched earlier this summer, I think
Okay.
at the end of July, and it is in just a few developments, just specifically in Upper Manhattan and parts of
Okay.
the Bronx. So again, framing it is a pilot. We're
Yeah.
standing it up very slowly and putting it together intentionally. So.
Okay. So it is active and it's in progress in rolling out into more sites.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, right now it's just in the sites that it is
Okay.
pre-designated. So that's why I'm keen to frame it as a pilot because
Got
this
it.
is the moment that we're deciding like where would it make sense to extend.
Okay. And who ended up who was the contractor? Who did you guys end up working with to build that out?
So that's a program that's primarily overseen by my colleague Dave at
Mhm.
the Housing Preservation and Development, and he is working with the New York Public Library, who hired a broadband access coordinator to sort of be the connection person there. And the provider that they are working with there is Flume.
Flume. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So Flume, I think, was involved when we originally had the New York City Internet Master Plan under Mayor Bill de Blasio. I think Flume was tapped for one of those pilot projects that I believe didn't actually get off the ground because the plan changed under the new administration. And we're about to elect another mayoral administration. We are talking a couple of days before early voting starts. This episode may run before or after we know the actual election results, but regardless, the next mayor will not be Mayor Eric Adams, who has not stepped down from his position, but he dropped out of the race. So, with that in mind, how do you prepare this digital equity roadmap that's already in progress and your office overall to transition to a new mayoral administration?
Yeah, yeah. The thing is that the items that are sort of like left in the roadmap and the items that we've already completed, like we're going to continue to prioritize and move the digital equity roadmap forward regardless of who the administration is. Like I really view digital equity as a field that is agnostic of politics in general, because internet access is important for everyone, and understanding how to use the internet is important for everyone. So regardless of what happens here, like this office will still be here to help provide internet sites to get online for New Yorkers, and providing devices for New Yorkers to use to get on the internet, and then providing whatever sort of in-person, like human support that New Yorkers would want or need in order to fully participate online.
Are you planning to stay in this role in the under the new administration?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I mean, this work is it's truly all I think about. So, yeah, I mean, I back to the beginning, like this, I could not say no to this role because it just felt so perfect for me. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, So on the digital equity roadmap, you also mentioned the Big Apple Connect program, which I know has now been renewed. I just wanted to ask you because it was in the news. The city council had a hearing about some concerns that there's surveillance. The NYPD can basically tap into those cameras at NYCHA sites. I mostly want to ask you about this because you also mentioned people's trust issues with subscribing to the internet. So I just wanted to see if you had any comments on that concern overall and how we can sort of address people's trust issues in subscribing to the internet, even free services, when there are concerns about surveillance, for one. Also, programs get stripped away from people overnight, like the Affordable Connectivity Program. A lot of people had to be convinced to sign up for that, only to have that benefit stripped away. So, knowing there are a lot of complications involved with delivering internet and getting companies to sign up to, offer their services at lower prices and such, how do you manage the concerns around, privacy, security, surveillance, et cetera, with also helping people get access to the internet that they really need to conduct their day-to-day lives?
Yeah, one of the most appealing things to me about this job when I was first, applying and just going through the interview process, one of the most important things to me was seeing that this office, the Digital Equity Office, lives in a division of the Office of Technology and Innovation that's called external partnerships. Like this work, digital equity, and I know this from my time at NDIA, like typically a digital equity office will be housed under something like an infrastructure department because of the internet, right? Like people think of digital equity and they're like, oh, it must be the internet. But you and I know, and other people who have been doing this work know that this work of digital equity is ultimately about working with other people and organizations and bringing in, like, widening the tent, and bringing in as many experts and practitioners and advocates and trusted communicators, as you mentioned, to make the ecosystem of digital equity as strong as it can be. So ultimately, around the question of trust, and I do agree, but ultimately, like this is again one of the tenets of the digital equity roadmap, is to do the coalition building and to build out this digital equity ecosystem. And the way you do that is by bringing in as many people as possible, especially prioritizing those organizations and community anchor institutions that are already trusted by the public. So
Hmm.
this is where the public libraries come in. This is where those community-based organizations that work with specific populations that we want to work with. Like that's where bringing those folks in is really key and integral to this job. And a few weeks ago during Digital Inclusion Week, my office hosted an event to celebrate Digital Inclusion Week. But it was an event in which we brought in city agencies whose programs are related to digital equity in some way, shape, or form. Um, but I was also very, very keen on inviting these trusted community-based organizations and these trusted partners into this, so that very, very proud. I'm gonna toot my own horn here. We got over 100 attendees for this event, and it's always kind of nerve-wracking when you're having a party, basically. But I was like, okay, cool. Like everyone is here, and this is a strong foundation on which we can bridge those trust gaps and sort of and build something that's important for the communities in New York that are most affected by this.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think as I mentioned before we started recording, I recently spoke with the neighborhood tech help folks as well, and agree that bringing libraries into the mix and other trusted institutions is a great way to boost access. Which I've also learned in talking with NDIA folks as well. Anyone who works in digital equity knows that you need to get as local as possible to in terms of trusted organizations to help bring people into the internet fold. You also mentioned earlier that digital equity is a nonpartisan issue. I don't remember your exact words, but something along those lines. And yet, here we are in this moment where, at the federal level, the Digital Equity Act has been canceled. Words like diversity, equity, and inclusion are suddenly bad and grounds for having programs canceled and grants rescinded. And we already touched on the loss of benefits like the ACP and such. So, what impact is all of that having on your work? Is New York City directly affected by the loss of Digital Equity Act funding? And overall, just what is this sort of move away from the DEI and equity doing for your work here in New York City?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Like I would first, I think back to my old colleagues at NDIA who are really great at like addressing like the field wide
Hmm.
um, impact of the Digital Equity Act. But for me and my little office here in New York, like it's all about uh, continuing to do the work moving forward, right? Like again, it call it what you want, like call this field what you want, but ultimately the internet is here and it's here to stay, and more people rely on the internet in order to do what they need to do online and to exist in society. It's so ingrained in our lives. And as long as the internet is here, we know that offices like mine need to exist in order to bring everyone up together. So the work is going to continue regardless, and I'm really viewing my role and my office's role as moving that forward by any means possible. Right? Like we need to get people online, and we need to educate folks on what they are able to do online. And again, like I can't do this alone, so that's where I would stress the importance of bringing in people who are smarter than me in this world. And these are these like, sorry to use the wonky term, but like the external stakeholders, like the people who are doing this work more actively every day. And to the extent that I can like get people in the same room and facilitate a discussion and eventually lead to solutions and policies and programs, that's what I'm really here to be doing, just to so I because I recognize that I can't do this alone, so I need to bring folks in to help me out.
Yeah, and just on partnerships, does it help to partner, outside of New York City with other large cities, or do you have stakeholder meeting? I mean, collaborator meetings with other sort of digital equity officers outside of New York City to get other ideas?
I mean, I just very informally through the
Yeah.
NDIA listserv, which of
Yeah.
course
Yeah.
is super active. I'm not as active on there as I was before June because
You got a lot to do.
not my not, yeah, but I'm still browsing the emails that come in,
Yeah.
and of course, whenever there's something that's tangentially related to like local government, then I'm good. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's always something to learn there. So.
So just to close us out then, you've been in this position for a little while, but I think you've learned a lot and have a lot more that you want to do here. So any final takeaways in terms of the biggest challenges you've been facing, any success stories that you want to highlight? And I'll also tie in any major takeaways from the Digital Inclusion Week that you mentioned that we had here in New York City pretty recently.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, like, I think that all of my final remarks are related to that Digital Inclusion Week event. Like, it was such an important. It was so important for me and this office to put something on like that that was specifically that is open to the public. Like,
Mhm.
we really wanted to emphasize the fact that, like, bring in your community-based organizations, bring in whomever X, Y, and Z, bring in people who are doing adult literacy, bring people in for whom you know they might be doing the work of digital equity, but they might not recognize it because it can be a little bit of an esoteric word. Like, I come from the field, like I fully recognize that. So, one of the things that I did in that and during our Digital Inclusion Week event was to do the definition slide. Like, here is digital equity and what it means, and then here are some examples, and here is what digital inclusion means and how those two things are related. And I have said those words so many times because that was sort of our bread and butter at NDIA. And I was going into this Digital Inclusion Week event. I was sort of like, do we need to do this again? Like, come on, these are executive directors of organizations. Like, these are people who are high up in city government. And I was like, do I need to do this? But what I noticed is, like, I was going to do it anyway. So when I got to that slide, I, uh, I noticed that a lot of the room were taking photos of the slide. And of course, like, people wanted the slide deck afterwards, and we were happy to oblige. But that really signaled to me, like, okay, so we do want to build from a place where we're using shared vocabulary and a
Yeah.
shared framework so that when we do go and develop programs and policies together, like, we're all on the same page. So it was really important for me to do that, and I would think I think it was a success. So I'm
Yeah.
really really happy with it.
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure to speak with you and hear about all of the great work you're doing. Thank you for working so hard for the people of New York City. And I hope you'll come back next year under Mayor whomever and talk about all of the continued success you guys are having.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for having me, Nicole.
My pleasure. Thank you again, Paolo, for joining me. Thank you as well to Pierre Landriau for editing this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Light Reading Podcast for more episodes of The Divide, as well as interviews and insights from the Light Reading team. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.